Welcome to SAP Art of Business Studio. We are here at the beautiful Heimat Museum in Davos during the World Economic Forum annual meeting. Today's session is going to be about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the AI space. We're going to delve into better understanding what are the current challenges, what are the opportunities in this space, how are we together creating a more inclusive, diverse, and equitable future for AI and develop, therefore, inclusive technologies. I have a very exciting panel with me here today. We're having starting from my right side, Ulli, and then followed by Cassie and Marc. They will surely introduce themselves, and you're going to be learning more about what they're doing and what's their connection with AI and diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm Manda, your moderator for today, SAP consultant and director for global partnerships at Businesswoman Network. Let's hear more about you, Ulli, and also I would love to understand what does diversity, equity, and inclusion means for you and for Siemens.
All right, thanks very much for having me, Anna-Maria. So I feel very humbled and honored to participate in the panel with such an awesome guest paneling. So my name is Ulli Waltinger. I work for a company called Siemens since more than 30 years. I was driving AI and machine learning for 10 years in corporate research. And since 2 years, I'm also a VP for AI and IoT at Siemens Advanta. So quite, thoughtful and quite long-lasting along the line of the AI strategy of Siemens and bringing more AI and machine learning methodologies to our products, our services, our processes, but also our customers and partners. So what are they mean for me? That comes from diversity, equity, inclusion. I think DI and AI can be seen from both sides. On the one side, what does diversity, equity, inclusion do for AI? And what does AI do for diversity and equity and inclusion? In overall, I think it's about the implications to consider a holistic view of background information, of experiences, of setups, of data representations for building, training, but also deploying AI applications, so that we are mitigating bias and we are somehow supporting an equal share in representatives of the individuals, thus disregarding of the demographics, right? So that's not easy in our data-driven world because our data is not evenly distributed, also not in our case. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge from accessibility to application, accessibility to data, accessibility to training, competence, but also applicability. So can we use it actually in whatsoever background specific? So that drives me in shaping these kinds of AI principles, not only on the principle levels, but actually fueling it also with action behind it, which I'm happy to share in this panel together.
Thank you so much for already putting such a strong framework about what we're going to be talking today, and I'm very curious to enter more into discussion to learn about what are you doing concretely at Siemens in this direction. Thank you. Let's hear more about you, Cassie.
Hi, I'm Cassie Kozyrkov. I was Chief Decision Scientist at Google until just a few months ago. I was at Google for 10 years. And what I did was I helped them arrange their applied data science, and AI processes for maximum effectiveness, safety, reliability, and of course, creating a lot of good in the world. And when I think about the diversity in AI topic, so I've often said, and I've been saying for many years, that in AI, diversity is a must-have, it's not a nice-to-have. So there are all sorts of big-hearted reasons that one might want to do this, but there are also just plain practical reasons. You are not going to get good results unless you take diversity seriously. And to just give a quick sketch for the audience. So often people talk about AI bias, and I'd love to give the shortest ever lecture on AI bias. I call it the Hemingway lecture, because of the sad story in 6 words that Hemingway wrote, the shortest story. It was for sale, baby shoes never worn, so I can do the same thing with AI, 6 words. I'm just gonna, AI is gonna be 1 word if nobody minds. So, AI bias, inappropriate textbooks never examined. Now, when I say textbooks, I could mean examples, I could mean data, right? Because data sets are like textbooks for the machine student to learn from. And like other kinds of textbooks, data sets are made by human authors. And so you would have to be a really bad teacher to just assign your student some textbook. It's got something written on the cover. You have no idea who wrote it. And you know what? You didn't even bother to open the textbook. And you're just like, wow, it says mathematics on the front. Here, take it, read it. And then you're surprised that your student ends up learning a bunch of potentially horrible things, right? You don't know who that author was. And if it was just one author, what were their blind spots? Because whatever went into that textbook is what the machine's going to learn. And then you think about, okay, so you're going to be a good teacher, you're going to read the textbook, make sure it's the right textbook for your student. What if you, as the teacher, have exactly the same blind spots as the author? You have exactly the same lived experience, you don't realize what might be wrong with this textbook. Then you give your stamp of approval and off it goes. And then you get very, very bad results. And unfortunately, machines as students, they only learn what's in the textbook. They don't have these other sources of information. When you think of humans learning, sure, the student learns something in the classroom and then goes off, and then their parents teach them something. They learn something on TV, their friends tell them. Here, literally, what's in the textbook is all your machine gets. So if your textbook is written poorly by authors who weren't thinking, had blind spots, and then it was checked by people who had exactly those same blind spots, bad results. So that's why you need diversity in both the authorship of the datasets and in the checking of the datasets. Different lived experience really does help you get better results.
Very succinct and beautiful 6-word story indeed. And that's the challenge that we actually have, because we are all biased, right? So we're going to be discussing as well, how can we do to remove that bias in AI, given that we are working with the machine? So how can we create better textbooks? Thank you so much, Cassie. Let's hear about you, Marc.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. Hello, my name is Marc Lakner, leading our business from Kearney in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And as Kearney is one of the leading strategy consultant firms, advising people on strategic transformation and operations topic, and also advising CXOs on the most pressing issues. AI is certainly on the top of the list. You just need to walk here on the promenade in Davos. You see AI on every house, so AI is really important. And we believe as a firm, and probably the others will agree, it's one of the elements that will revolutionize our life, our working life, but also our social life. And in this context, we just had this morning a new study announced on leadership in AI. It's important that leaders understand what is it about, what are the potentials, and replace fear with knowledge. And if this goes right, I think, and we have also an equitable access to AI, we can get benefits for all. And I think that's a strong mission, strong task, a strong challenge, but we are all in for it and looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, very, very curious to learn more about how you're dealing with customers, because you obviously work across the globe, across industry. So let's talk in a minute more about it. There is a tremendous opportunity in this moment in time with the revolution AI is bringing. We have for sure a lot of challenges. Nevertheless, if we have the right policies and frameworks, and this is where we're going to discuss more about, we can change the world. As we say at SAP, we were going to be able to make the world run better and improve people's lives. And that's key, because AI is going to change the way we're working, the way we're communicating. Everything we're doing today is going to be a mindset shift, and we have to adjust very fast to that environment. At SAP, we have, as we call it, the framework of the 3 R's. We're talking about reliable AI, we're talking about responsible AI, and relevant AI. And we believe strongly that this is what's going to drive further a context without bias and with inclusivity across the different regions of the globe, across industries, and allowing everybody to have access to AI. Now, then AI will definitely change, but let's hear, Ulli, in your view, what is the most critical challenge that we face today? We heard bias, but I'm curious to learn more from your angle and from Siemens' experience. What are the challenges that you see next to bias and how we can make sure that we're addressing these fundamental challenges. So in the future, we develop applications and technologies that are indeed inclusive and accessible to everybody.
A tricky one, is it? Not an easy one. So AI, not since the hype of generative AI, most recently, the recent years, let's say the November momentum, which happened when ChatGPT came into every household and every employee's office at the desk. Accessibility as one aspect on that. But you know, AI will continue to transform a lot of processes in our business world, but also in our society. At Siemens, we have the notion of connecting the digital and the real world. That means we have in our application scenarios of AI and machine learning, you know, two sides of the plate. The digital world, simulation, representation, data aspects, but we always need to connect it to the physical world, infrastructure, assets, mobility, health, grids, and manufacturing processes. And that means also that applying AI in these kinds of processes, in these kinds of products, it comes with a different caveat, which we call industrial grade. That means it needs to have certain kinds of qualities, robustness, we share that, right? Trustworthiness, we share that, because most of our systems and products are not necessarily software-based, but actually hardware-based. So we guide, advise, companion, co-pilot, I guess, in nowadays times, our clients, but also the engineers, the process engineers, the domain warehouse, with digital technologies, shutting things down, starting things up, and changing something or stopping a line in a specific industry costs hell of a money, and stopping certain or accelerating certain kinds of robotic system is hell of dangerous. So that means it's not only about whether we represent the domain and the background and individuals in our data, but it's also caveats of how secure, how robust this is, how can we apply it from one case to the other. With that, and the strive towards using more AI across all our processes, and this goes now in Siemens in a broad perspective, communication, what we read, how we read, HR, P&O it's called in our organization, who we hire, what job opportunities do we have, learning organization, what skills do we need to attract, but also, you know, financial aspects, will the customer pay on time? And manufacturing and the traditional aspects. So throughout the years, Siemens has more and more embraced to apply AI not only to their products for their partners, but also for the internal processes. And with that, the human comes much more in the focus. Recruiting, communication, workers' council, these kinds of aspects. So we started 5 years ago, keen on with SAP actually, the responsive AI framework, a set of an approach in order to somehow structure, take all the use cases that we have back in the days and structure it along the line of 7 opportunities. Each of these opportunity fields are associated with certain kinds of risks, like privacy, like in representative data representations, or losing control aspects, and associated these kinds of aspects then with so-called mitigation channels. This was one approach in terms of somehow structuring the complexity that at least the businesses who owns the actual applications are aware of not only the opportunities, not only about the risks, because we want to have it positively connotated, but also knowing about there are certain risk mitigations which can be undertaken by each individual of us. This is fueled in a program, in a larger program. We're talking at Siemens, roughly 1,400 AI experts. We're talking about AI patents around 3.5. That makes us ranked 13th in the world. And that is fueled by a continuous monitoring under the CTO office. So this was a first attempt in detangling and making people in the organization, but also at our partners, aware of how we move together for.
Thank you so much for sharing. I really love the aspect of awareness because I strongly believe it does start there. And we had the pleasure together with you at Siemens to start this journey 5 years ago. You were very intentional. You put a lot of resources and thinking into it. But as you said, there are a lot of cavities. So it's important to be always on top of this and to invest resources. And I was actually wondering, Cassie, because you have such a strong data science, is there any way that we can use data science to foresee this kind of biases and to also mitigate them?
Sure, but.
There's always a but.
There's always a but. When we want to make data useful for anything, when we think about what the data science bit is, it's a sort of implementation on someone's statement of what would be useful. Mm-hmm. So the people who are responsible for that are typically not the data scientists themselves. So saying what we need done, what it would look like to succeed, what we even mean by bias, because that's a word that all kinds of people use in all kinds of different ways. If you're talking about statistical bias, that's fairly straightforward and mathematical. And if we're talking about subtle ways in which we humans might be jerks to one another, that's a completely different thing. If we're talking about bias as in technology is biased by the perspectives that we get from our lived experience that subtly get into the technology without us necessarily meaning for them to be in there, that's another one entirely. So the concept of no bias at all would involve removing the human entirely, and all our technology comes from us. Mm-hmm. So we have to be quite careful about our language. Now, what I like to think of when I think about removing bias, that is removing accidental harm to people, where what we are doing is not aligned with the values that we would like to be aligned with, and we have taken some data and let in the dangers of having technology that then doesn't represent the best of what we would want to be representing as humans. You have to be very careful in specifying what on earth it would look like to mitigate those biases before you can go send a data science team to chase them. Because the very clear and obvious ones that you hear data science helping with, it essentially says, hey, let's look at maybe the spread of the representation in the population of some characteristics, and then let's look at the representation in our data set. And whoa, hey, look, we've got no women in this data set, so why would we be surprised if our technology then fails to represent them and work for them? Because, you know, your system trained on data is only expected to work in the kinds of situations it was trained for. In fact, I tell Google engineers if they're going anywhere near machine learning and AI, they should consider tattooing on their foreheads. The world represented by your data is the only world that you can expect to succeed in. So if the world represented by your data is a world, let's say, that only has men, no women, and you try to launch the system in a world that does in fact have women, surprise, badness. So it's very, let's say, it's the very trivial beginner level thing to say, look, my world has women, my data doesn't, look, I've got an issue. The other kinds of ways that we could have failure to represent the needs of all the people that we're trying to represent, they're subtle. And a data science team won't necessarily know what to look for. And there's so much domain expertise and so much leadership and so much crafting the question in the first place that plays into it, that we really can't expect to punt it to some mathematics or some tangle of wires or some code. You know, you hire some smart PhD and all of a sudden they're a philosopher. That's kind of not how that goes. So what I'm really trying to say is that it is a leadership first question, and it is about being very careful about specifying what you're trying to do and what it would mean to succeed at making the world better with technology before you go send a data science team to chase it.
Thank you so much for sharing. And you mentioned, the gender aspect, but it's all about the social economical aspects as well. It's about the different cultures, the different way that each of us has needs, and we represent that in the data sets. And therefore, it's essential, as I mentioned, to make sure that we are inclusive whenever we're analyzing data, to have all those elements in there. And that leads me to you, Marc, because I want to understand more. I know you're working with so many customers, and it must be very different based on the industry and also the geographical position of your customers. But I want to understand more, first of all, how do you see the development of technologies? Do you have any frameworks specifically at Kearney? And what do you see as a standard or as a trend towards your customers?
Very good questions. So let's start maybe with the latter one.
Yes.
Our clients typically all want safe AI, a fair AI, and also transparent AI, if this is possible. But that's at least a starting point.
If it's defined.
If it's defined. That's the starting point, and we always say, look, for us, is artificial intelligence means also for us amplifying intelligence of the humans, so helping the humans to get better and to improve things. And for us as a firm, we are right now 100 years, almost 100 years old, and our founder, Tom Kearney, always said it's about essential rightness. And I think, therefore, we also committed to help our clients to have an ethical and equitable AI that helps really our clients. And we have a framework that seems to be quite simple, but we say, look, the first step is to look who is impacted by the AI and how. And the second step, maybe also obvious, but it's also to say, look, what are potential adverse implications, what we can mitigate of it. And in these elements, we have two principles. That's on the one hand side, the bias. So to try to avoid or minimize bias, because I think we will never get rid of it. And to push fairness, that means is a protected group discriminated, or is the data set not right, what you mentioned. And on the other side, that's also important, it's also the explainability and the transparency. So can we explain the results? Can we make it somehow logical for them? And we all know it's a black box, it's a challenge, but that's what we try to aim for, and that's the framework we use internally but also externally.
Very interesting, and a big challenge always. Did you notice any patterns in specific industries in the way they're driving internally their policies and frameworks?
Good point. I mean, what we see is that a lot of companies are experimenting, piloting, testing things. Probably they start more on the white collar side, on the admin side, on the marketing and sales side, on the side where you can, knowledge-based side where you can extract very quickly things. But we also see you can have a much broader application area. And therefore, what we always say to the clients is, don't only invest in the technology, but also invest in change and transformation. Because otherwise, you will not be able to bring it to all, and you will not bring it to exploit full potential. And if you ask me for specifics, I mean, they of course, as I said, more sales and marketing driven companies. Just had this morning in our session, one from the largest personal search companies. They say, look, they started with developing new job profiles easily with this. That was the starting point. And then we had also another person in the meeting who said, look, we tried, they have 270,000 people in the food and beverage area. We're not only doing this in the white collar, but we're also doing this in the blue collar manufacturing area to build quality processes in.
And that leads me actually to accessibility, because I think the big trend is really to focus more on the white collar at the moment, but there are many companies starting to go in the blue collar as well. And I would like to know, Ulli, at Siemens, how do you approach accessibility and how do you ensure that this is available across the globe and across the different interactions you have with your partners?
Mm-hmm. So in any AI use case, I would say in Siemens need to tick three different boxes, let's say. The first is obviously also business, right? So profitable, scalable, profitable, right? AI is now, well, we came the last, let's say, 8-10 years on, experimenting with technology around machine learning, around data. Pretty much all the funding had the feeling from HR and learning, you know, getting the people, we're talking more than 200,000 people in Siemens, right? Getting aware of what does data do to you? How do you use low code, no code, these kinds of aspects, right? So now we're converging into like, you know, we want to see profitability, right? We are moving from experimentation to profitability. The market is, you know, expected to grow 35%, more plus minus whatever, right? But continuously, annually, so it's a big opportunity. The second one is the layer is diligent implementation. We're talking about rules, regulations. We're talking about European AI Act. I'm sure we're touching that in a second, right? We're talking about processes aspects, right? Which we need to cover. How to make sure responsible, but also accountable, right? Implementing these things. And the third tick box is actually meaningful intention, you know? There's a great paper from Nature, right, that AI and machine learning has 78% positive contribution. There was also negative contribution, speaking of, you know, ICT, energy efficiency, water, and stuff like that. But overall, it's, you know, it's a positive contribution to the sustainability goals. And that means also along these three angles, this is anchored also in us. Like, if you talk about meaningful attention, SDGs targets are part of the long-term incentives of our management board, right? Corporate processes, right? Obviously, we have product and safety and the, you know, data protection and those kinds of aspects. In addition, we adopted actually a process also for our workers' council, the model cards. We adopted it, and they're called now AI cards at Siemens. That means, because it's not easy if an HR which is not in machine learning and AI, and he's you know, except I have a new startup which, you know, makes, I don't know, you know, monitoring of certain kinds of aspects or properties of certain kinds of people relevant and shows how it matches to the organization or not, or what it would be the best position, right? It's fuel of opportunities in first place for the business owner, right? And so in order to make sure to have a common language and have a common documentation along the line, what does the model do? Do you ask the right question to the vendor? Do you ask the right question to the application? We established some kinds of what we now call AI cards in order to at least have a common basis talking business and technology on a common level. And there may be blind spots and back and forth, but it's a common process in order to start that, right?
So I would love to talk about, I see so much of this, the difference in expectations and utility of such things between leaders who are well-versed, like yourself, plus engineers, you know, I'd say call it experts, and then users or citizens out there. And there are a few messaging things that I would love for us to acknowledge, some elephants in the room. So one of them is this business of explainability. So we all understand that the whole point of AI is that if you could write the instructions, the code by hand, if you could program it, that would be the safest way to do it, because, you know, the rules are going to be stuck to. Why would you use examples to explain your wishes when you can write instructions? The reason that you're going to data examples is that the instructions are just too complicated to write by hand, right? So this is important. The model itself, underlying, is going to be very complicated. That is what we've signed up for, fundamentally. And it's not, when people think about understanding it or explaining it, it's not that it's a black box that's hidden and top secret or something like that. It's more like, if I tried to read what's in there, it's so long and boring and complicated, it would be a stack of printouts, right, of really boring numbers. And I'd be like, okay, person, here, read the thing. And you start reading it, you're 3 pages in, you've forgotten what's on the first page, and you've got another few thousand to go. That's our problem. And so then when we talk about explainability, we talk about boiling down this book that's very, very boring into a tweet. And I just would love for people to remember that a book is not the tweet, right? You lose a lot. And there's also opportunity for all kinds of danger, mistakes, etc. So experts tend to understand this, but then one of the mis-expectations that's communicated to the general public is, for example, that it is understandable. Instead, maybe we should remind ourselves that we are trying to solve humanity's most complicated problems. And if you want a simple solution, you're not going to be able to solve the problem that doesn't have a simple solution. So this is a difficult trade we're making. When you have very complex things, stuff goes wrong, right? That's thing one. Thing two, and I'm going to take an opportunity to say this because it's like my last moment, because I'm about to found a startup. And then the minute that we have companies that are technology oriented, right, or the minute you're running departments, I have my startup, I can no longer say this thing, so I'm going to say it. Right, when I have my startup and it's AI oriented, all of a sudden I have to beat that same drum we're all beating, which is like, it's AI, it's the whole thing, we do the whole thing, everything is AI, right? It's all that vibe. The thing I'm going to say now to remind the viewers is that in actual fact, AI components are very different and they are a very small piece of any product or system. They are often the control logic itself, the tests, the ways in which you might switch between AI models, all that's written the traditional way. That can be so much more important to performance than that little AI bit itself. But these days, right, if I have even a fingernail's worth of AI code in the whole body that is my company, right, I will have every incentive to thump my chest and say AI company, right? All of us do. And when we do that and we make AI sound like one holistic thing, again, I think it sets expectations that are a little bit weird. Likewise, the idea that working in AI means that the work is the same, that an AI expert knows the everything of AI and they're interchangeable with any other AI expert. Or the worst, that when you're hiring for a team, that like you could have an AI person and that's it, that it's a one-person job. In fact, there are a lot of folks that have to be involved whose training might not sound anything like traditional AI, right? Like you need user experience researchers who know about AI. You need ethicists who know about AI, product managers, statisticians, all kinds of domain experts. And so what I'm really trying to say is that we have some funny expectation set. Plus we have these three phases of AI, the algorithms research beforehand, which didn't require as much care in bias, etc., because it was just all about the mathematics. Then when we're applying it at scale, the applied AI phase, whoa, now we've got a big monolithic solution. We'd better make sure it doesn't harm our users, but that's a finished product kind of deal. And then we've got the generative AI case, raw material given out to everyone, good luck and go. Totally different thing again. And so every time we talk about any of these issues in AI, right, we're all incentivized to make it sound like it's one thing, it's one soup. But it's instead thousands of different cases. And I'm glad I had my opportunity because when I'm a founder, I'll be like, AI.
Well, I'm happy you had this window then before, and I'm really glad you brought up these expectations because indeed it is a hype, and we all know that when we start to talk about it, not everybody is on the same page. That's why also from the beginning we wanted to put a framework to really understand what does it actually mean and how do we execute it. And at Kearney, you actually have the opportunity to kind of drive the way for a lot of your customers. You have the opportunity to set those expectations for them. And I was wondering, what is the best practice for you to actually make sure that your customers are taking the right steps towards a diverse and inclusive AI journey?
I think first I want to react also
yes.
on this. I think we all believe that the big challenges of the CXOs this time, growth in uncertain time, the resilience topic, the sustainability topic, are important, and AI can only play an element to it. A very important element, because in the end, if you want to optimize, if you want to be faster, more resilient, you need to have this end-to-end thinking. Therefore, you need data to analyze data and to get a right perspective. AI is a great tool, is powerful. How to get now our clients to be safe, fair, transparent, and hopefully also beneficial for all AI. I think what we typically tell them, start small, scale up big, try and test it. As I said before, invest in the beginning as much money in transformation and in learning and in training as you do in technology. And then, and that's probably the most important thing, because the leaders think they have understood it, but they all think the others have not understood it. So you need to also convince the middle management that this is important and this is working. Because otherwise they say no. And then you have fancy PowerPoint slides, you have great ideas, you have great tools, and it's not working. And I think, and I'm convinced, we need to work with it, we need to start with it, and we need to exploit opportunities there, because I truly believe there's a lot of productivity potential, but there's also still a lot of, I've heard this expression FOBO, fear of becoming obsolete. So we need to replace fear with knowledge, and then I think we're on the right track.
And I think it goes in a bit of direction because if I talk to CFO-centric people, they see AI as an investment. Like I buy a software, I install it, it works, right? And so the notion of setting the mindset, okay, now we need to have continuous monitoring. This model will drift. Let me explain you what drift means, right? This model will shape a bubble bias, which may be not your bubble, or may be surprising, also positively, right? Aspects. And this kinds of shift that a CFO needs to see him or herself as an innovation officer than an investment officer, let's say, is a mindset shift which we need to have and also try to embrace in our corporation. Second aspect, I love the notion what you said, like, right, obviously with data. So we came from aspects that, yes, rule-based, it's explainable, right, aspects in there. So coding language is, you know, syntax-based, so we can make programs work. Then one said, okay, data is now the new programming language. So, okay, data, and it's biased, it's not representative, and it's screwed, and it's probably not the real world, right, aspects. So we came up with innovation around, let's do simulation, let's do post and prior mortem analysis, to, you know, A/B testing along the line aspects. And now we have GenAI. That means suddenly your language is the programming language. On top of biased engines, let's say, of each other, which is in first place awesome, awesome. Everyone can somehow promote and exposed to AI technology, machine learning in these kinds of aspects. At Siemens we had significance. I thought I have never stood like that. So last year's, like in February, right, ChatGPT came into the place and also in our organization, and Siemens had full stop basically on ChatGPT in the organization because everybody using the OpenAI's great application, right? Application, but it's not under industrial and corporate process, let's say, right? And I've never had that the organization itself as a body embraced a complex technology transformer architecture, nerdy, geeky things, right? At scale, at such a momentum, so the leadership just had one role. Okay, stop it here, right? Close the ports. Nobody's using that. We matured the organization, we matured the let's say, the access to GPT technologies, right? And then went, 3 months later, all in corporate email to all employees. Now, experiment, explore what this does to your task, for your aspects. And for me, there was the first, like a signal momentum of, you know, converging is like, okay, that's another path towards, you know, what AI for our corporation at Siemens actually means. So I thought it's pretty awesome, but it's a stacked bias problem. Cassie, I'm with you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And policies are always extremely important. Also at SAP, we made sure to have an internal ethical committee, but also to have external advisors to really make sure that those policies you're referring are in place, and whenever our employees are using and making the best out of this amazing technology, we're actually trying to you know, secure a better future. And the better future actually leads me back to you, Marc, because I would like to know, what is your message to the audience, to the customers out there that want to start this journey? The one takeaway from today's session and a wish or a call to action for them.
Call to action. My call to action is we need to ensure that AI is really amplifying the intelligence of the humans and the people. And in this context, make sure that it's beneficial for all. And the call for action is start now.
Thank you very much. From your part, Cassie, one last takeaway and call to action for our audience?
You're going to hate it, I promise you. I've picked one that you're going to hate. So I'm a recovering statistician, and we are the data professionals with the biggest trust issues. And I actually think that this is a good thing. Professionals in this game will not trust a system that they haven't tested. So if you're not willing to carefully test and check that everything actually works for you, regardless of what anybody else says about that system, you're in for a rough ride, unless it's okay you're using it for something not that important. So just having some balance, some understanding of, am I using it to generate some pictures of cats? Or is this something mission critical? And if it's something mission critical, please check it yourself in your own context. Don't form these expectations that just because it's mathematical, it's going to work, it's beautiful, it's perfect, it's objective. It's pretty subjective, but it's also very useful, potentially. But be like a professional in this space. Get some trust issues. It's going to be good.
Trust issues. Good. Thank you so much for sharing. And let's see from your side, Ulli, what is also something that Siemens look at towards the future to do, and what is your call to action for our audience?
The call for action is we can't do that alone. We need to collaborate. I think the lessons learned that we went through speaking in the digital environment is cybersecurity. We are a founding member of the Charter of Trust, which we identified that making the infrastructure resilient and secure and trustworthy is not something we just can only do by ourselves. We need to collaborate with others. And the same goes here with AI. We collaborated together with Bosch, with BASF, with TÜV, with SAP on a trust label, some kind approach of a first specification, VDT 912, pretty geeky now, but it's an attempt in a collaborative manner, have a systematic view in partners together about accountability, fairness, and transparency and price in AI in our infrastructure. And that means, you know, start now, I'm fully with you, be aware of the risk, it's encapsulated, but get in there and let's do it together.
Yeah, and I love what you said, just to bring these two things together. Don't trust yourself either. That's why you need other people. You need people that are different from you. You need teams with different lived experiences so that when you're examining what you've got, whether it works, how you can make it better, don't just trust yourself to see that. Really make sure that you represent a lot of perspectives.
On those words, I want to thank our panelists, Marc, Cassie, Ulli. Thank you so much for being with us today, talking about this important topic. And for our audience, we have one message. Let's shape the future of AI, a diverse and inclusive AI, together. Thank you.